Lime Sulfur. I go through about 3 or 4 of these bottles every single year. So I've been thinking, can I make this stuff myself? What is it actually made of? What do I use it for? And I'm going to cover all 3 topics in this video. Now, lime sulfur is made by boiling lime and sulfur for an hour. It is a really smelly exercise, so it needs to be done outside. So, what I've been doing, I have been collecting some stuff. I still had a camping cooker and a very old pot. I got a new spoon, because I'm not sure I'm going to get it clean, stirrers and a wooden spoon. A big box of bottles. Because the chemicals that you buy, they only come in bulk, so I'm going to make a bulk. Also, the amount of work involved in creating this is so much, might as well be worth my effort. I've got a 1/4 liter and 1/2 liter bottles for chemical products. Then of course the stars of the show. Pure sulfur. This is 1/2 kilo. This is 1 kilo of sulfur. Calcium oxide, 1 kilo, 97% pure. And another sulfur at 99% pure. Otherwise it's impossible to get it in the bottles. And of course there's going to be lots of debris floating in the pot afterwards, so I can just sift it, and I might actually put a filter in there as well. My lungs, my eyes, they are worth more than lime sulfur. So, a full face mask with fitting chemical filters, a few gloves. And of course I'm not going to do this in my t-shirt and my shorts. I'm going to put on some old clothes later on. I think that is it. Right, now what do I use lime sulfur for? Lime sulfur is predominantly used on deadwood. It stops fungal infection in deadwood, and with that it delays the decay of deadwood. And that is what most people use it for. You just use a few drops and you paint it over the deadwood, and once it is dried up, the deadwood gets all white and it is protected for a couple of months. And you do this twice a year. Now, what many people don't realize, it is also a very good fungicide and insecticide to be used in a winter spray. And you mix this in 1 to 20 in a spray bottle with water, and then you spray your plants. So 1 part of the lime sulfur on 20 parts of water, and you spray your plants at the beginning of winter and at the end of winter, and that way you reduce the insect infection over winter, and you reduce the risk of fungals in your trees. I think I'm going to have to get changed. I'm going to have to move the table. I'm going to cover everything up. I'm going to do this outside. I think most of my neighbors are inside. I hope that most of them have their windows closed. I know I closed my windows. And I'm just going to put the table somewhere in a corner where there's a slight breeze, so avoid me standing in the fumes all the time. Now I've got way more sulfur here than I've got lime. And that's for a good reason, because you have to mix these in roughly 1 to 2. So 1 part of lime goes into 2 parts of sulfur. Or actually it's the other way around. You do the lime in the water first, and once that gets hot, you start adding the sulfur. Now the roughly 1 to 2 is with a reason. I have checked the literature, and the recommendation is somewhere between 1.9 times the amount of calcium to 2.2 times the amount of calcium in sulfur in the solution. I'm going to do the simplest. I'm just going to do 1 to 2. I need 10 times the amount of water, so there is 1 kilo of calcium. I'm going to add 10 liters of water for that. Now the pot that I have should be about 10 liters. Let's see whether this all fits in here. Right. This pot is exactly 9.5 liters, so I can't make 10 liters in one go. I'm going to go for 8. Let's adjust all the amounts for 8 liters of lime sulfur. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first dissolve this in about 7-8 liters of water, so the bulk of the water is going to have the calcium oxide, and that's going to absorb most of the heat. And then I'll have 2 or 3 liters of sulfur with water. And that I can then slowly add as it starts to boil and mix it up. Now, if you're wondering, how much did this all cost? I'm going to do a full breakdown of all the costs involved for the whole process and per bottle, so you can judge whether this is worth the effort financially. Can already tell you, nah. So that's 0.8 kilos of lime and 1.6 kilos of elemental sulfur. And I'm sifting this because you can tell here there's big lumps, and I want this to dissolve as complete as possible, so I'm pressing it through the sieve as I have it here anyway. Now the exact ratio is not all that critical, and the reason is everything that is not absorbed and is not in the reaction will just crystallize later on. Well, elemental sulfur in itself is not such a danger to your health. Still not great to breathe it in large scale, right? So I'm not going to do this with calcium oxide because it's highly reactive, and I want it all to be reacting in the water and not in this pot. As you can see, it is quite windy, which is really good later on. It will really dissipate the smell. No reaction to take place here, this is just mixing it. So, stir it to sort of a paste. Now I'm going to get my mask, I'm going to weigh off the calcium oxide, and I'm going to mix that. And I'm not going to record it because at this stage I'm not going to put a lot of effort in my camera. I'll show you once the calcium is going in. We're going to take the calcium oxide, lime, and we're going to add this to water. Now what will happen is that the lime will respond to the water in an exothermic reaction. Basically the water combines with calcium oxide and you get calcium hydroxide. This is a very strong alkaline solution, particularly when we start adding the sulfur, so it is not pleasant. This is the most critical step in the whole process because a lot of heat is generated. How much? I don't know exactly, but we will find out how hot it gets. I doubt you can still understand what I'm saying, but here we go. So this is the very reactive stuff. I'm going to slowly pour it in. Right. This is nearing boiling, about 90 degrees. Time to start ladling in some of the sulfur. I think I may have added too much sulfur in one go. It's now not dissolving much anymore. You just have to be patient. It is getting really hot now though. Slowly the frothiness is disappearing. The sulfur is really starting to dissolve and react. Starting to smell. And I really don't know if you can hear me what I'm saying. What I'm doing is I still have a little bit of sulfur left over here. I'm just adding it a little bit at a time. But the color is still not right. It needs to be dark red before it is done. So this will take an hour, hour and a half. Right, this has now been simmering for about half an hour. And slowly you can see all the sulfur going into solution, starting to react, and the color is really starting to get this dark reddish tone. I'm holding it at simmer point so that not too much evaporates. And if things evaporate, I pour some water in here and I can just gently add a little bit as the pot gets emptier. Of course this reduces the heat, but at least it's pre-filled. It's been a little over an hour.
And look at that color. And what's also happening is I see some crystallization now happening at the surface. I think I have a little bit too much sulfur. And you see the little bits and particles that are left over from when I poured in water. But I think this is about right. This is starting to get the color that I wanted to have.
Pretty simple, right? Once that is done, I'm going to let it cool down. Going to let all the crystals crystallize, and once it's cooled down, I'm going to fill it into bottles. Now it's important to realize this stuff oxidizes once it is in contact with air. So these bottles I always keep closed, I keep them at the same temperature, but you still see there is crystallization here on the inside of the bottle. So I want to avoid that as much as possible. I'm going to not expose it to air. I'm going to, as much as possible, work with the lid on the top, with the lid on the pot, so that oxygen can't get all that easily to the liquid, particularly when cooling down. I think this is important. And of course, once I'm filling the bottles, I'm going to do so in a fairly quick and effective manner. It's been 2 hours. Most of the things are cleaned up. I'm really happy I didn't use a good ladle for this, because this really has suffered a bit of damage. I don't know whether it's just a coating or whether it's actually damaged. This should have cooled down a little, but you can see it is still very, very warm, but that's okay. Now, because this stuff really is not healthy, it's not good for your eyes. Protective gear. I'm still wearing my old clothes, which are all going to go in the laundry once I've done. These have been washed. Still a little bit humid, but should work. Right. Now, I've been thinking about how am I going to get all the little debris out. Of course, you have this little mesh here, but that's not going to be sufficient. So I took a piece of old t-shirt and I'm going to just use that as an initial filter. Let's push that in. Get all the... This is all going to be very, very messy. There we go. First bottle is done. Does look pretty good, doesn't it? But I'm going to keep it in place here because it holds down the rest of the bottles. And now just another 9 liters, some 30 bottles to go. And this of course is production work now. Just need to go and fill all of them up. I don't think this is going to be all that interesting for you to watch. And in fact, I don't want to sit here with my face over this tub. I want to get a bit of distance and I'm going to stand up again. And then in the end, I'll show you how many bottles I created. Alright, one thing I hadn't foreseen. This filter is getting blocked up all the time. I've replaced it a few times. I've washed it a few times. I'm now at the stage that I'm really getting to the ugly part. Just last little bit here at the bottom, so I might just take the cloth out and then just pour this just through the sieve. What do you think? I think it's the only way. That means there's going to be quite a few diluted particles in there, but then again I do expect a lot of crystallization still to take place in here as it cools down. Solubility reduces and I expect some flaking to appear in these bottles over the next 24 hours. But yeah, didn't expect that one. I did put a new mesh on. Let's see. This is going to be really messy. It's a small bottle. Hope this is not way too much. You see, this is now again directly, completely blocked. And the last sludge, don't know what to do with it otherwise, just pour it in a bottle. And who knows, maybe it will settle a little bit more overnight. And then tomorrow I can pour out the Yin Liquid, and all the sludge I can then just hand in at the chemical waste deposit. Most of it is sulfur, which is a good indication that it's fully saturated. This just didn't dissolve properly and didn't react. Well, there we go. Lime sulfur. A whole box of it. Little leftover pieces, you can see how much residue, how much sediment is in there. But the top is still okay, so I think this is still useful. And I'm going to just use it. Now, earlier in the video I was talking about personal protection and also being aware of the stuff. And look at what this new spoon looks like. The sieve also all discolored. And I don't think this will ever get clean. So that is what this stuff can do. So be careful if you ever decide to proceed and do this as well. Let me do a little bit of a breakdown on what my costs have been for this stuff. In fact, I think I have to go inside, make the breakdown, then I can record it. There you have it. Homemade Yin Liquid, Lime Sulfur. What did it cost? Let's go through the numbers, shall we? I have it here on a notepad, so you might see me looking away from the camera every once in a while, but let's just do this. I bought calcium oxide and it came in a box of 1 kilogram, which was 21 euros. But I only used 0.8, so that is 16.97. Then I bought sulfur. I bought 2.5 kilos, but I only used of it 1.6 kilos. So that is 11.75 euros. Then bottles. The bottles were €1.15 each, coming to a total of about 19.55 for the bottles that I made. And I made, let me check that, yes, I made 17 bottles in total of this. That excludes the one bottle with residue, because that is usually not something that you want to keep. So I had 11 of these and had 6 of those. Keep that in mind, because we'll have to divide it later on. Then I bought spoons and stirring equipment, sieves, all those sort of things. I don't have to count them, because if I make it again, then I'll use them again. But just for the sake of argument, that was about 18 euros. Interestingly, the gas mask was not expensive at all. You can get these already for 17.95, say 18 euros as well. Now, if I do my mathematics right, then everything together comes down to a total number of about 85 euros, 84 euros 30. With that, as I said, I made 11 bottles of this, 6 bottles of this. So that's 11, that is 5.5 liters, and 6, that's 1.5 liters, that is therefore 7 liters in total of Yin Liquid. So the cost, 84.30 divided by the 7 liters that I made, comes down to a cost price per liter bottled up, €12.04. That means that one of these bottles, half a liter, cost on average €6.04. And this one cost roughly €3 to make. Now if you look at trade prices for half a liter bottle are roughly 15 to 20 euros. Trade bottle prices for these are interestingly a lot higher relatively, because they're 10 to 15 euros if you go to trade. So is it financially interesting? Well, maybe if you make a big batch like this. On the other hand, I'm not going to use that much stuff in the next decade, probably. Well, next 5 years. Keeping it for 5 years is of course an option. I'm probably just going to take it to a club auction and sell a few off. But this is roughly what the cost price is to make it compared to what you actually pay for it in a store. Is it worth the effort? Not really. I spent a whole afternoon working on this. All my clothes had to be washed. I have all these leftover bits and pieces that actually I need to do a second run, so I use the calcium oxide before it turns bad. And I still have the sulfur to make it. I still have a few more bottles. So yeah, if I had a bigger pot, I could have just made the whole batch in one go as intended. It just didn't fit. I guess with that, we've covered everything. I'm going to pack these away in the basement until it's time for auctions. And that's it for now. This was Jelle, growing bonsai, creating Ying Liquid. You can do it, but be careful. It is aggressive stuff. Don't get it in your eyes. Don't get it on your skin. Have fun. Keep growing bonsai and see you next time.